I have no idea what GMOs are.
What about you?
No clue.
Genetically modified something.
Nope, I have no idea.
What I know is food that has been like genetically modified, and I think it should be labeled. People can know what they're eating.
Occupy Wall Street demonstrators marched on Monday calling for better government regulation of the most basic things, the food that we eat and the water we drink. Much of the anger was directed at Monsanto, a corporate giant that makes genetically modified seeds for corn, cotton, soybeans, and other staples, making them more able to survive pesticides. Demonstrators say...
Well, I've seen a hummingbird sitting on a rose. I've seen a butterfly kiss a child's nose. I've worked in the garden, I felt dirt between my toes. I like to live an organic life, not one with GMO. 'Cause we don't want your GMOs, we don't want your beans. We want to grow our food with unaltered genes. And we're gonna love it 'cause that's what we do best. So you can take your GMOs, we'll take all the rest. And that's a line you want to remember as we go along. You'll have a chance to join in with that. Well, I might be over the hill, but I'm outstanding in the field. You try to hide the truth, but the dangers are revealed. So I will take a stand and we will all stand steady. We don't want to eat anything that's grown Roundup ready. 'Cause we don't want your GMOs, we don't want your clones. We don't want your Frankenfish, leave our food supply alone. We're gonna make a difference out here in the West, so you can take your GMOs, we'll take all the rest.
My name's Kurtzel. I am the sustainability consultant. I consult on education program development here, do energy monitoring project that's going on here, and then I am also the 21 Acres farm beekeeper. This fall I took a trip I drove back from Wisconsin to Seattle and passed through, just acres and acres and acres of corn and soybean that are grown in Minnesota and North Dakota, and also in Montana and eastern Washington to some degree. But those types of farms have been promoted as a way to make the most money for the acreage that you have. What 21 Acres is attempting to do is to turn back the clock a little bit, not so much going back to the early pre-depression days of how farmers made a living, but instead to try and make a statement about what food quality is. People want to make sure that something is fresh when they buy it, and it has the minerals and nutrients in it that they've come to expect. And I think large corporate agriculture it has a difficult time providing that. They can provide a lot of something, but they have a difficult time providing that high quality product. You're not going to burn down large farmers' crops as a form of protest or anything. The economies are what drive the market, and for a long time the organic food movement was something that didn't have the same kind of widespread appeal that it has now. I mean, when Puget Consumers Co-op, PCC, first started, and co-ops all over the U.S. For that matter, they were small, little hippie-run places, storefronts that people brought their garden produce to, and everybody knew that it was really good quality, but it was a real fringe part of society, and it's taken a while for that to grow to where Whole Foods has been able to co-opt this movement and corporatize the idea of organic and sustainable food. It is a protest. It's more about I have choice with my money, and I choose to buy this over something else that I know may not have the same kind of food quality that I've come to expect or wish that I could have all the time.
I'm Melissa Watkinson. I currently work at the University of Washington Bothell as a community outreach coordinator with the Office of Community-Based Onion Research. And I'm also a volunteer with Oxfam America as a lead organizer for the Seattle Oxfam Action Corps. With something like GMOs, it's individuals and communities battling against large corporations who have a lot of money and a lot of power. And the only way to really combat that and the power and the money that's coming from the opponents is to grow as a community and grow the values and the education and knowledge around what the individuals want on their own personal level, working together, because voices do matter and they can make a huge difference, but we have to work together on those things. Personally, I want to know what's going in my body. I have the right to know what I'm consuming, and I have the right to make the choices for what I'm consuming. So if I'm not aware of what is in the food that I'm taking in or serving into my community, then my rights are being violated. Well, I would first start off with, and not everybody would care, especially in the United States, but people in the United States pay the least amount of food than anywhere else in the world. And we don't value our food and what we consume as Americans because there are so many other things that we are occupied with our day. But that's what keeps us alive. It's what keeps us nutritious and healthy. And so that should be, in my opinion, one of the most valuable pieces of what we are cautious about when we're purchasing and consuming food. And then the other aspect is that if we don't have make that personal choice, then we're letting somebody else make that choice for us. Monsanto is making the choice for many, many Americans. Not only is the corn that's being produced with the GMOs in the food that we eat, but it's also in other things that we consume, oil and gas, and the meats that we consume as well. It's all across the board. And if we're not aware of those issues, then we're letting somebody else make those choices for us. When I was in Des Moines, Iowa, I was privileged to attend the World Food Prize, which is considered to be the Nobel Peace Prize for food and agriculture. Everyone joins in this large summit for talking and learning about hunger and poverty around the world. The largest donor for the World Food Prize is Monsanto. But I was there representing Oxfam, which is a large international development and aid organization. And there are many other organizations represented there who don't necessarily align with the values of Monsanto, but we're all there talking and learning about food together and trying to see what are the best practices for bettering our world when it comes to poverty and hunger. So outside of each of the buildings that the World Food Prize was at, there were occupiers from the Occupy movement protesting against Monsanto. And I would have happily joined them as an individual, as a protester. But on the other side of it, being attending it and representing at the World Food Prize, I learned what the other side of that protest might have meant. And I believe that the people who were actually within the Occupy movement weren't as educated about what other individuals were being represented in organizations at the World Food Prize. And I think having, as an Occupy movement, being a little bit more aware of who else they might be protesting, or come with a particular agenda against Monsanto, because that's who the individual or the company that they were protesting. But you know, their protests didn't change any of the occurrences that were happening at the World Food Prize. It didn't change anybody's mind about being there, because as somebody from, you know, trying to do the right thing with hunger and poverty, at least the right thing that I consider to be, you know, I want to be on their side, but at the same time they don't acknowledge the side that we're on, and we need to make those. We need to have those conversations in order to make larger changes. They were gathering all together, and honestly, it probably wasn't more than about 10 people at a time. I don't know if it's just because Des Moines is pretty small, or because, you know, there were a lot of people who really did value the World Food Prize being in their community. But they had signs, they were shouting, you know, ban Monsanto, and it was all very, very focused on Monsanto, so it wasn't, they weren't attacking everything else. They were attacking, obviously, Monsanto and the World Food Prize, because Monsanto was the largest funder for the World Food Prize. But it was just shouting and picketing, really. As an individual and as somebody representing Oxfam, I tend to go with, you know, I look at what they're doing, and I'm happy that there's somebody kind of able to voice their opinions and bring that to attention. The Occupy group that week were in the media a lot in Iowa, and brought to attention of the World Food Prize. But as far as what Monsanto probably took from that experience, I sat at a lunch with somebody with Monsanto at the World Food Prize, because again, you know, everyone had shared lunches together, and it was an all-soy lunch. So he was very happy with the representation of soy being at this lunch, and honestly, it was a very quiet table. There wasn't a whole lot of conversation that was going around, because it was clear that we didn't agree on many things, if not most. But he did continue to rave about Monsanto and the product of GMOs, and he was very pleased that it was an all-soy meal for everybody, and that everyone's enjoying this all-soy meal. Given that, and then how large of a corporation Monsanto really is, and how many times I'm sure they are probably addressed with the Occupy movement or other forms of protest, I really think that it did little to none on Monsanto's perspective, aside from them turning their cheek again on what a small group of people did against, you know, against Monsanto and what they're actually doing.
Well, I've seen a hummingbird sitting on a rose. I've seen a butterfly kiss a child's nose. I've worked in the garden, I felt dirt between my toes. I like to live an organic life, not one with GMOs. 'Cause we don't want your GMOs, we don't want your beans. We want to grow our food with unaltered genes. And we're gonna love it, 'cause that's what we do best. So you can take your GMOs, we'll take all the rest. And that's a line you want to remember as we go along. You'll have a chance to join in with that. Well, I might be over the hill, but I'm outstanding in the field. You try to hide the truth, but the dangers are revealed. So I will take a stand, and we will all stand steady. We don't want to eat anything that's grown Roundup ready. 'Cause we don't want your GMOs, we don't want your clones. We don't want your Frankenfish, leave our food supply alone. We're gonna make a difference out here in the West, so you can take your GMOs. We'll take all the rest. Well, you might call it progress to modify those genes, but as these things